Have you ever had those times when you're working on your Keynote presentation and you put a shape on the slide and you just can't get it to do what you want? You know, you wish you could put your hand through the screen and just move it around. Well, you can't do that quite yet. And believe me, I've had those struggles myself. My name is Mike Prasad from learnhowtopresent.com. And I want to show you some quick and dirty tips on working with shapes in Keynote. So let's get into it. All right, guys. So now with Keynote open, the two main ways you're going to insert shapes into Keynote or onto your slide is by way of the insert menu here. You can click on insert, you can click on shape, and then you can pick a shape that you like here. Or if you like the toolbar, you can come up here, you can click on the insert shape object here. So when you click on that, you'll notice the first three objects are actually lines. So your three types of lines are your straight line, you have your line with heads on it, and you can actually change the type of arrowhead here by clicking on endpoints. You can actually change the type of point that you like. And the third option or third type of line is a connector line. So you notice there's two main points here. There's one here and one here. And this is when you want to have two objects on the screen, but you want to connect them by way of a line. And that's what this is. Note here too, with this type of line or connector line, you can actually move the control point any way you want. So you have lots of flexibility in terms of working with that line. Cool. So the next slide here is, again, this is just a general overview of the different shapes. Might look like a primary slide, or, you know, you've probably seen these objects when you're in primary school, but these are your main shapes and objects that you can place onto your Keynote slide. Next, let's talk about shape styles. So these styles are basically formatting options for your shapes. So just like for text, you can have bold, underline, italicize. For shapes, you can have similar items. So let's put a quick shape on our screen, and we're just going to click on the insert and let's pick a square. So again, note, when you want to manipulate your shape, you always obviously have to select it. You can either click on it or you can click the drag and select it. And when you come up here to your style menu, you can use one of the preset shape styles. So click on them and you'll see your presetting, or you're using the presets to fill the shape. And you can click on here to reset it back to scratch. Here, again, you have your fill option here. You can click on color fill. There's different types of fill, gradient fills. If you want to choose a different or multiple colors to choose or to create a gradient, you can do that. Advanced gradient, etc. So for example, let's click on color fill. You can click on the palette drop down and you can pick any color you like there. If you want to click on this option here, it gives you the color palette. And if you want to get really specific, you can choose one of these colors or create your own color there. Let's just go back to no color for a second. So again, in terms of border, you can choose which type of border, no border or line. And again, you can adjust the type of line. So do you want a solid line? Do you want dashed lines? Again, the color of the line, you can change that here if you like. And then this thickness of the line is determined by this option here. So you can use the up and down arrows. You can click those if you like, or you can just key in an entry if you want and just hit return. That's a bit too big, obviously. So I'm just going to go back to 5 and hit return. Shadow and reflection. Again, you're probably not going to want to use these if you're doing a professional presentation, but they are there. And then the other option down here is the opacity. So you can drag this anywhere from 0, which you probably wouldn't use, anywhere from, again, 0 to 100. And again, you can use the up and down here, or you can just click in and enter in your value and click return. Cool. So that's the general shape styles there. So next up, let's talk about selecting shapes. Selecting shapes is one of the fundamental things you're going to want to do with Keynote or working with shapes. So let's insert a shape. And the two ways to do it are to either click or drag. So when you click on the object, you'll notice you have the selection handles here, or once you have the shape on screen, you can click and drag and it selects your shape. So next up, we have the ability to enlarge and constrain proportions. And what the heck does that mean? Well, let's say we have our object on screen. Again, let's use a standard square. Now, if we just manipulate the object by grabbing the handles, you'll notice I can choose or manipulate it in any way I want. Now, you may or may not want this, but let's say you want to constrain the proportions, okay? Which basically means you want to maintain the aspect ratio of the object. So if you hold down the shift key and click and drag, you'll notice a couple of things is happening. One, it's constraining the proportions, okay? The angles aren't changing. And 2, it's maintaining the insertion point. So when you insert a shape onto your Keynote slide, it always has an insertion point. And for this instance, it's right here. Again, notice if I hold down shift and drag, it's maintaining the insertion point and it's constraining their proportions. All right, so moving along. So let's say you want to insert an object and you want to enlarge it, but you want to maintain the center point. Well, what's the center point? So again, let's use our old square here as an example. And remember, in the previous slide, we talked about the insertion point. The insertion point for this object is going to be right here, but the center point, we assume, obviously, is right here, right? So let's say we hold down the Option key and drag, and look what happens. The object enlarges on the center point, or from the center point, but it doesn't constrain the proportions. So I can do this by dragging, vertically up and down, or horizontally left and right. And notice it's, again, it's enlarging, but it's not constraining the proportions or the angles. So if we hold down the Shift and Option key, you'll notice when we drag now, it enlarges and it constrains the proportions on center point. So again, this is pretty handy for maintaining your center point and constraining the proportions or maintaining your angles. All right, so next up, let's say you have a shape on your screen that you want to rotate. So let's use the old triangle here. We've been using the square for a bit. Let's use the triangle. So let's hold down the Shift and Option key. And what's that going to do? It's going to enlarge on the center point and constrain the proportions. So Shift and Option and drag makes it nice and big for us. So again, you know what? I want this rotated just a little bit. So I'm going to hold on the Command key, going to select, and we're going to drag. And notice what happens. It drags or it rotates the object in really small increments. So, if you're one of those crazy people that wants to rotate your object 303.8 degrees, you can do that by holding down the Command key and dragging. All right, next up, let's say you had that same object on screen. So let's say we have that triangle back. Again, Shift and Option to enlarge and constrain. And let's say I want to rotate this thing by 45 degrees. So again, let's click to select and let's hold down Shift and Command. And now what's going to happen, it's going to rotate by 45 degrees. And you can see it's rotating nicely on axis on a 45 degree. So you can get really nice control, really quick and simple like that. So next up, let's say we want to drag to rotate on insertion point. So what does that mean? So again, let's use the double-headed arrow here. Make it a bit bigger, and let's hold down the Command and Option key. Now when we rotate, look what happens. It rotates on the insertion point. Okay, so that's the final way, and you can see it's going in small detail or small increments there. So next up, let's say we want to drag to rotate on the insertion point. So let's insert a arrowhead here, and let's make this a bit bigger. So Shift and Option again, drag, and let's hold down Command and Option. And now look what happens. When I rotate, it rotates on the insertion point, and again, it rotates in those small increments. So if you've been paying attention, hopefully you have been, if you hold down Shift, Command, Option, and rotate, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to rotate in 45 degree increments. So you can see we get nice control in a more precise 45 degree increments using Shift, Command, Option. All right, next up is multiple shapes. So we've conquered single shapes and multiple shapes, nothing too scary. It's the same principles apply, the same techniques and the same shortcuts. So let's put a shape on screen and let's duplicate that. All right, so now that we have both shapes on screen, again, you're not going to click and select one shape and modify it and then try and do the same things to the other ones. You want to click and select them both. So to do that, you can hold down Shift and select them both, or you can click and drag to select them. Now, what you want to do here is to unite the shapes, and to unite them, what you want to do is to click on your format menu here, then click on Shapes and Lines, and then unite the shapes. And just like the title says, unite the shapes. Now, instead of treating one object as a single object, both of your objects are treated as one. So anything you do now is going to be or affect both objects. So again, same shortcut keys apply. We can use Shift and Option to click and drag. If we hold down Shift and Command, we can rotate, that sort of thing. And then same with our style. So again, we have our objects selected, they're united. And if let's say we modify the border color to blue and we want to pump that up to 10 point, things like that. So that's how you work with multiple shapes. All right, guys, so now you know how to work with shapes. Pretty easy, nothing too scary. Use the shortcut keys on your Mac keyboard. And don't be afraid, just try it out. And I hope that helps. So I'm going to leave the shortcut keys in the description bar for the video. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. That's it for now. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.